Hello, career thought leaders. It's good to see you today. And today we're talking about how we use AI in career services. And we're going to kind of pull together some things that we've talked about a bit before, but how do we really help clients use this in the best way and in a way that is ethical? Now, sometimes when we say ethical, I don't know that we all mean the same thing, but today I'm just going to think about how do we use it in a way that is authentic, that isn't feeling like we're making things up, that will still feel credible to a user, to a reader of our materials or whatever that might be, and a way that feels good with us, aligns with our values, and gets the outputs that we need. So there's a lot of concerns around privacy and bias, and we're going to talk through those as well. But it just, I think sometimes we don't really get on the same page as what we mean by those terms. So we're going to go through that a little bit more specifically today. And hopefully my microphone is working because it's doing weird noises. Okay, so let's dive in and talk about what we are helping clients with and some of the concerns that maybe you're seeing clients have with using AI in their work. So here's the reason that this came up. We are seeing people talk about using AI in their resume. We're seeing employers talk about, hey, we don't want an AI generated resume. And I wanted to dig deeper than all the noise because there's a lot of noise about should you or shouldn't you, should they penalize us for using it, all of those things. But one of the key ingredients of a conversation is that I'm getting to know you. So when you are using AI for interview prep, for an interview, for resume, for LinkedIn profile, we want to make sure that the AI doesn't get in the way of that foundational purpose of conversation, which is I get to know you. You can say, oh, recruiters don't like that I'm using it. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, do you like that you're using it? Are you coming across the way you want to come across as a candidate or as a business owner if you're using it for marketing? It's less about us versus them and should I or shouldn't I get penalized. And it's more about what do you want? How do you want to come across? How do you want to start the conversation? Because that's what matters the most. What does it do for your brand, for your conversation to use these tools? And so here are a few of the things that we want to watch out for. As a coach, you have people coming to you and you may notice that something sounds AI generated. We have students in our resume writing class that turn in resumes and all of this sounds AI generated. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, and it's not wrong that you use the tools. We teach you how to use them. However, if it sounds AI generated, if it's giving me that feel, there's some things we can do to fix it, or there's some things we can watch out for to make sure it doesn't feel that way. So today we're going to talk about some of those things to watch out for, and then some of the ways you can troubleshoot that with your clients, or even maybe with yourself. If you're using it for marketing, you want to ask some of these same questions as you're using it for marketing. I was just realizing that I'm getting some notifications from something that's kind of dinging. So I'm just going to mute that so we don't get that anymore. Okay. So if we're thinking about how our clients are coming to us, some of the things we want to watch out for: gendered language, gendered biased language. So when you're reading someone's resume or profile, this may not come up as much, but you do want to think about, are the words that are being used gendered? Now, here's kind of one of the weird things is that it's gendered biased in writing towards a male writing can actually benefit your clients because many studies have shown that unfortunately resumes score better, are seen as more effective, stronger, etc., when they use that male language. So that's actually a way the bias is benefiting us. If we're using these tools to help write some content on a resume, that male biased language is actually fitting into what is the hiring process also. However, it may also give you some gendered language if it thinks you're writing about a female or that you're writing to a female. You've got to be careful with that. It can give suggestions for career ideas that can be gender biased. We talk about, if I say I'm researching ideas for someone who was a nurse, it may give me ideas that are seen as more friendly to a female client, even if my client is not. So I can ask about that. I can say I'm working with a male nurse, even if I'm not, and just play around with that idea that we know it's giving us some biased suggestions. So I can ask for specific things to make sure it's not as biased. Those are some options we have to play around with it once we know that it might be doing that. The other thing, we talked about this a little bit a week or so ago, is that it gives the same phrasing over and over again in a resume. It loves successfully, it loves insured. And once you've seen a few of these, you can pick out that language right away. In a cover letter, in the first paragraph, it always says like enthusiastic, and it uses some of those words. You just want to be careful with that. Does that really sound like you? And we're going to talk about some questions you can use here in just a minute to ask your client, does this really sound like you? Is this what you want it to sound like? So those are some things to think about when it comes to looking for it, identifying it. And even if it wasn't AI generated, is this really you? Is this authentic? It sounds like a lot of resumes I see. And you might even say it that way instead of saying it sounds like it's AI generated. You may just say this sounds like a lot of the content I see. It doesn't sound like you. It doesn't sound, differentiated. Let's dig in and help you create that. And then your client might say, oh, yeah, well, it is AI generated. So you don't have to necessarily call that out. You could just say this sounds like a lot of what I hear, a lot of what I read, whatever. Or it may be that you're getting this very Western writing. There was just a study out of Harvard Business Review, I think out of maybe Cambridge, that these generative AI tools make everything sound Western language. So if you're working with someone who's in other contexts or is from other contexts, we may just want to say, hey, that doesn't fit for you as well, does it? Tell me about it. All of those questions that we're going to dive into. So here's a framework that we're just playing around with to help people think about this. Does it sound like me? So does it feel like you? That emotional connection, does this feel like you? What are you trying to do with the tool? So there are some use cases that, yes, ChatGPT can do, but I wouldn't recommend. One is writing your stories. So giving it basic information and saying, write bullet points for my resume, unless you're giving it the story, you're asking it to write something it cannot possibly know, and therefore it's going to write fiction, and it's not your story. It's a fictional story. So be careful of that intent. When you're trying to get it to do something that isn't the best use case, you're going to get bad output. Language, is the tone consistent with your voice? And we're going to talk about a few tools you can use to look at tone here in just a minute. Trust, do you feel confident submitting this? Can you back up everything that's on here, that evidence piece? And then what might we change to make it feel more aligned? And there's some of the tools or prompts that we could use to help with that. But this is that filter, some questions that we could ask our clients to just help them think through what it is that they want to say, how they want it to come across. If we're feeling like it doesn't quite sound right, these are a few questions that we could ask aligned with that filter, although my lovely little slide app here put them side by side instead of all in one line. It's a great opportunity to just ask these questions. So when we're going through this process with people, again, we might say this doesn't just sound quite right, or it sounds like a lot of things I hear. That's really common. Let's dig in and figure out how we can make it a little bit more differentiating for you. So would you be proud to talk about this in an interview? So just because it might be a story that AI picks out or says is relevant, if you don't want to talk about it in an interview, we want to be careful about how we share it. Let's read this out loud, or how would you say this in your own words? Those are some things that we could ask depending on the situation. Does this reflect how you solve problems, or does this reflect your strengths versus just the kind of generic information about how this task is done? So here's a few of the tools that you can use to play around with to check things. So there's actually a bias barometer that can scan for biased language. We've been talking about these for a while because we were talking about them in terms of looking at your resume for more female language that could hurt your chances of getting an interview. Interesting now that we're talking about it in a different way, but bias barometer. There's some AI detectors, so you could run your content through an AI detector. Those are kind of hit or miss. They're not 100%, but they might be helpful. How would it be rewarded if it is identified as AI generated content? Even if it isn't AI generated, comes from a book, comes from ONET, whatever, it still might flag that. Hemingway editor. And of course, you can use Grammarly. The Grammarly tone detector has gotten a little less effective, but depending on how people have it set up, it may work for them. But the Hemingway editor will give you some of that as well in terms of tone. Or you can use a prompt, rewrite this to sound more like this, or incorporate more of this, or here's more of my story. Weave that into the bullet. So you can still use the chat types of tools, but give them more direction, give them more context, give them the values or the adjectives you want it to align with so that it can write more like you. Those are all things we can do to get the benefit of the system without having it sound a certain way. You can also do the same thing with your generating career ideas. Like I said, if you're using it with a nurse, you might say, I'm working with a male nurse, even if you're not, just to do that gender parity. Be careful about how much context you give it that might cause a gendered outcome. So if I say I'm working with a nurse, or I could say healthcare professional, working with someone that has a BS in nursing. Instead, I could just say I'm working with someone who has a BS who's interested in healthcare. So we can prompt it in different ways that don't involve as much bias. And then, of course, we want to think about the intent. And I'll just come back to this. What are you trying to get the system to do? And is that really the best thing to be using it to do, even though it could? Yes, it can write resume bullets, but if it's not using your content, you're automatically creating a bad situation moving forward. It's not your content. So it's not going to sound like you. Even when it is your content, you have to be careful about it sounding like you, right? Or like when I do career exploration, a lot of times I'll start with just the bare bones of skills, not the person's resume, because I don't want all of that filtered in there yet. Just what do they like to do? And how can we start brainstorming there and then work in the industries they're interested in, or those types of things. Loading a resume up and saying, what are the best career fields for me based on this resume is not the best use, because it's filtering in everything on there, things I might not like to do. And it may be missing some things I do like to do just because my resume doesn't include them. So it's about coaching the person, especially that's how we talk about it in our programs. It's about coaching the person first, and then the tool is just a way to enrich that conversation. It can't replace the coaching work that we're doing. It enriches it. It can make it faster. It can do better research, all of those things. But we don't want to forget that the human's confidence, the human story is what really matters in the process. So if you're interested in learning more about how we're using these tools in the career space, not the theory, although we talk about ethics and those types of things, it's really step by step. How do you use these tools to help someone in their career space? Generative AI, as well as other AI tools, AI assessments in the career coaching space. Use AI in resume and profile creation. I didn't say writing, because there's a lot of other ways you can use it, even if you're not going to use it to write a bullet ever. The research and the analysis, there's so much great stuff there. Use AI in job search coaching. So the coaching piece of job search, and how are they going to network? All of those things we can use AI to help. Again, we don't use it as a replacement. and then interview coaching. So if you're interested in those, we'd recommend or love you to have you join us in these programs that we have coming up starting next week, but we run them every quarter. So jump in now, and then you'll have access to this quarter's content as well as next quarter that we run it, and everywhere in between through our AI Sandbox, which is a part of this program. So get out there, start using these tools with clients, join us in our credentials, join us in our sandbox so that you can start using these tools a little bit better as well. And we look forward to hearing how you're using them or other questions you have about using them so that we can share that content in these Friday sessions. We'll be back on the 25th, so 2 weeks from today, July 25th, with another topic, and we'd love to hear what you want to learn about. So drop me a note, drop a note in the comments or the chat, and let me know. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.